Awesome. So I will keep letting people in as they join, but I'm going to jump right into it. Thank you for everybody that has joined the call. We do this every week where I get to talk a little bit about the business, which anyone who spends any time with me will realize that I could go on and on about the business. It's like my third child. So I am going to try to keep this brief so we can get to Q&A, which is the best portion of these calls. It's the most effective portion of these calls, in my opinion. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Maine. I ended up in Maryland for college and met my wife there, and that's how sometimes you get stuck in a geographic location. So I'm currently in Maryland. Well, I'm currently sitting in our corporate headquarters in Hanover, PA, which is right next to the Maryland border. I started off in retail banking and moved to brokerage, and then moved to asset management with starting with TD Bank, TD Ameritrade, Merrill Lynch, and then T. Rowe Price last. And so I had always been entrepreneurial, and I thought that, the reason I was jumping from place to place to place was I just hadn't found my thing yet. But in reality, I think it had always been my entrepreneurial tendencies had caused these types of jobs to be not what it was intended for me. So at the time, I didn't know that. I was sitting in my desk at T. Rowe Price, and I thought to myself, maybe if I have a business on the side, I'll be able to scratch that itch and stop going from place to place to place. And I was pretty invested in my career in finance. I had several securities licenses, the 66, 63, Series 7, insurance licenses, variable annuity. And I was T. Rowe Price's go-to for small business retirement plans, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, individual 401ks, et cetera. And I enjoyed my job and I was paid really well. And so I thought to myself, let's do a side business. Let's scratch that itch and see if maybe we'll have some certainty in my life for once. And I knew that my in-laws would appreciate that as well, who were not my in-laws at the time. And I looked at businesses that I thought were manager centric, but not skilled manager centric, meaning that a business that would have continuity if your key employee left. And so there were several businesses that I looked at. This essentially eliminated most food service businesses, including, pizzerias, because if your pizza maker is the one guy that can actually make pizzas, if they go down, then, either you have to step in or you have to close for the day. So the quick lube space was enticing because the manager already typically has 2 days off, which means that the full-time and part-time employee, or the two full-time employees, have to run the shop on the day that the manager takes off. And I also thought that there was a pretty big gap in the space in terms of the service provided and what the consumer really deserved. I feel like some of the bigger competitors had been on top for so long that they got complacent and stopped providing the level of service that people deserved. And I thought overall the industry had a credibility issue that needed to be resolved. And so I took over a quick lube in Harrisburg from an older couple that was just ready to pack it in. And the rest kind of went from there. I spent a lot of time on Yelp at the time because Yelp was still relevant then. It's not anymore, but at the time it was. And I reverse engineered the reviews on Yelp to basically come up with my thesis for what this industry needed. And I played that out in a second store in a small town called Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, town of 6,000 people. And when the model repeated itself from Harrisburg, which is a town of 48,000 people, or a city, if you will. I mean, I think not many people would call Harrisburg a city, but technically it's the capital of Pennsylvania. And then our third store was in a suburb of Chicago, and that was really a test of the processes that we put in place, because this was really the test to find out if this model could be truly absentee, because I was 800 miles away from Chicago, and it's a 12-hour drive, and 11 hours if you're going pretty fast through Indiana. And I could not be there on a regular basis. And so all the processes that we had put in place, all the software, third-party services, and all the SOPs, the standard operating procedures we put in place were really integral in making sure that we could run that store from Maryland. And so that worked really well. We opened a fourth store in Pittsburgh, which is Western PA. And so we had the 2 stores in Central PA, the store in Chicago, then the store in Pittsburgh. And then our 5th store was in Youngstown, Ohio, which is what we consider part of our Pittsburgh territory, because we're in a town called Boardman, which is on the border of Pennsylvania. It's about 45 minutes from the Pittsburgh airport. And that was our first store that we were able to build from scratch in terms of UI, UX, and really figure out how to make the service have the continuity and streamlinedness that we were looking for, to be able to really dumb this business down to the most common denominator. And that has been the goal the entire time, has been, how do we streamline this business? How do we keep this as lean as possible? How do we reduce the SKUs, reduce the labor hours, reduce the moving pieces to make this as palatable for an operator as possible? We had always been a consumer-facing business. We had always put the consumer first, and that helped us scale corporately. But then after we opened store number 10, I started looking at, how do we scale this for operators? How do we create a model that is more available to operators? And so what I did was I looked at all the problems that the larger quick lubes had, whether it was the high cost of entry because the building itself was so expensive, or the equipment package was expensive, or the staffing requirements were expensive. And we said, how do we create a model that operators can have, that is lean, not as many SKUs, we're not going outside the bounds of our expertise. And that really came down to the oil change only model, and the building itself, and the staffing requirements. And then I teamed up with Friend Defco, because they're an organization that has seen brands through from emerging to national, and scaling for me is very important, because I think that as electric vehicles penetrate the market, it's going to be important to have a model left behind that still services the immense amount of internal combustion engines that will be left behind. There's 350 million registered vehicles in the US, and 98% of them at the moment are internal combustion engines. So even if that is cut in half, there are certainly industries that are built upon consumer bases, much less than 175 million of anything. So we feel as though this industry is going to be here for the foreseeable future. And we want to be the ones that adapt and are left behind when things do start to change more rapidly. We've sold a lot of our territories, and I used to do one-on-one calls instead of these group calls, but we found that these group calls, one, allow for us to have me save more time, because I've become quite busy these days, but two, also, we've had such a diverse group of candidates, whether it's culturally, experience, business experience, ideologically, and that diversity of opinions and experience really helps with us as we go through this process. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, franchising is a laboratory of innovation, and some of the best products that the U.S. has ever had, such as the Munchkin donut at Dunkin' Donuts, was created by a franchisee. So that's something I think will be helpful as we grow the brand. I talked really fast, and I really dumbed down the background story. We have other calls that are on our website if you want a more in-depth background, but because I have to hop out of here and get back into our training with one of our franchisees, I wanted to make sure we had enough time for Q&A. So I'll turn it over to Michael to kind of curate questions.
Oh, great. Costa, thank you for that. I'm going to just on my screen move from the left to right. And if you wouldn't mind, we just start with one question each. That way we can get through everyone. And then if we have time left over, we'll go back around again. But Keith, you're the first one that comes up. Do you have a question for Costa?
Yeah, Costa, first of all, great to meet you. Thank you for holding this call. But really, the question is around how quick do you see the ROI on a typical franchise now that you guys are expanding quite rapidly? Do you see that ROI really come back to play and become, kind of cash neutral and really start making money in each of these buildings?
Yeah, so there's two models here. There's a conversion model, and then there's the new construction. The new construction obviously is a much longer time frame because of the state of the world right now with supply chain issues and just local municipalities being backed up in terms of getting permits out and things like that. And then, of course, the real estate side of it. We're coming off a very weird real estate market where it's been difficult to get brokers' attentions for the types of ground leases that we've needed because everyone has been able to sell so much real estate that ground lease for $2,000 a month doesn't really, there's not enough juice in those deals for brokers to keep you at the forefront of their mind. Fortunately, we have one of the best master brokers in all of franchising, so we've made a lot of headway in that instance. But to get back to your specific question, on a conversion, we've typically seen our ramp up period be anywhere from 9 to 12 months. We've had stores that have done car counts right out the gate that are enough to be cash flow positive from day one. But that's not typical. And one of our competitors, who is a publicly traded company in this space, they've stated on investor calls that they anticipate their franchisee ramp up periods to be anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And our model, I think, cuts that by a third. And so 2/3 rather. And so for us, we're not Chick-fil-A. We're not going to have a line around the building on day one, and then 90% of those people come back the second day and have lunch there every day that week for 4 days straight. Unfortunately, our business has a ramp up period, and every car that comes through our door on a grand opening, that particular car does not come back for another 3 months or 3,000 miles or 5,000 miles or whatever the interval is for that car. And there's really no way around that. Now, we can provide a service that is so refreshing to the customer that they suggest you to friends and family. And that is one of the ways to mitigate that ramp up period. On the flip side, though, our business is a quasi utility. And what I mean by that is we're not your electric bill where you're kind of forced into paying it every month, but it is a required part of maintenance of your vehicle, and our customer base is very sticky. So you'll see very quickly that the customers that are given the better mousetrap, so to speak, they will go ahead and return on a regular basis due to the service provided.
Next up, thank you for your question, Keith. Alfred, I see you're on the call and no last name, but do you have a question for Costa?
Yeah, Costa, good morning. This is Alfred Bonsu from the Atlanta area. And my question is, what do you see as, a potential in the Atlanta market, compared to the areas, other, cities that, you guys have in your territories?
So and thanks for joining the call, Alfred. Every single market that we've sold so far is a bigger market than essentially any of the places where we have stores. Our Mount Prospect store in Chicago is one of the larger towns, but our biggest store in terms of volume is Harrisburg, and it's a town of 48,000 people. In Atlanta, you could throw a rock and hit 48,000 cars. So we're excited to see how the model does in these more densely populated places. Commuting in America is uniquely car driven. Americans are uniquely autonomous and care about independence very much. That's why whenever the electric car conversation comes up, everyone talks about being worried about losing their charge on a long drive, which is, in my opinion, kind of a nonsense argument against EVs. There's plenty of arguments against EVs. That is not one of them. The technology will fix the range problem and the battery lifespan problem. Technology kind of solves everything in this country. That being said, the in a place like Atlanta, where there's not great public transportation, where the bus system is not fantastic, where the subway system is essentially non-existent, then or rail rather, then you'll have to have a car in order to do anything in those types of towns. And really, besides DC, LA, New York City, public transportation in all of these major cities is very commuter driven. And when the pandemic started in March of 2020, and we're coming on 2 years now of this, I was really worried about the oil change interval because of everyone moving to work from home. My wife was, our dream customer, someone that commuted 30 miles to her office every single day and did not want to do an oil change herself. That is our key customer right there. But what we found was, and what I observed was, people are running their errands while on the clock at their jobs. People are getting out of the house just for the sake of getting out of the house. And August of 2020, and then followed by September of 2020, were the two busiest months that we ever had. And then 2021 just absolutely obliterated all of the previous volume records. And so just to kind of tie this back into your question, Alfred, somewhere like Atlanta, there's a reason why there's several brands in the Atlanta market, is because there's enough cars to sustain this model. And if there's anything that we've learned from the pandemic, is that people will trade time for money all day, every day. And so we're able to, extract a premium from our service because of the fact that we're selling people back their time. And the fact that we focus on the oil change only model, which is kind of, at the end of the day, our ethos, our kind of guiding principle, we feel as though that is the model that will survive, and that these brands that are starting to do the all of the above approach will eventually lose customers, because customers are not going to want to sit behind a brake job or a tire rotation or changing tires or a serpentine belt. If you left your lunch just to get an oil change, then and you sit there for 45 minutes, you're gonna be like, man, I could have gotten an appointment at Meineke at this rate. So we think that the oil change only model will do really, really well in Atlanta, Charlotte, and some of the other key markets, Houston, et cetera.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Frank, just to add to Costa's comments, I've worked with a number of franchisees, and we've sold units in Atlanta already. And I'd say one of the things that's consistent, that's coming back, is wait times are really long, pricing is high, and the market is actually underserved given the growth and the size of the Atlanta market. We think that market, along with Dallas and Charlotte, are some of the top markets, fastest growing. And of course, in Florida, many cities there. So anyway, I thought that may be helpful, just for me to add. Jeremy, you're up next.
Yeah, hey, good morning. Jeremy Stafford, also out of the Atlanta market, and I can waiting time is long and very expensive here. So I think there's plenty of opportunity. My question is around employees and staffing, and any, I guess, challenges, or, hearing a lot of things about obviously staffing right now, and with inflation and keeping staffing. So I'm just wondering what you guys have seen, specifically in this market in terms of hiring employees and keeping employees.
So it sounds cliche, but it's definitely revolves around culture. So there's a few things that are specific to our industry that are helpful, and there's a few things specific to our model that are helpful. One, the fact that we don't do an all of the above approach means that we don't have to go after immensely skilled labor that we have to overpay for. And when you do these higher liability services, such as brakes and tires, the people that do those services expect to be compensated for it. The fact that we're doing just oil changes is a strategic, basically, advantage for us. However, just because we're not higher skilled employees doesn't mean it's not skilled employees. So the fact that this is an automotive related trade also gives that kind of baseline interest in the work itself. So the guys that we're bringing in to work for us, they have an interest in the subject matter. So it's not like a general laborer or someone holding the stop sign for Flagger Force or something, where you're just really, you're working a job for the sake of a job. These guys have an inherent interest in vehicles and cars, and that just adds that little bit of stickiness that allows you to have these guys stick around. Then on top of that, we don't have high pressure situations for our employees that some of our competitors do, in terms of our employees have to look over their shoulder wondering if they sold enough air filters to not get fired or sold enough flushes to not get fired. And that alone has gone a long ways for having continuity of employees. And so we weren't nearly as affected by the quote unquote great resignation as other companies were. In other industries in particular. The emergence of this gig economy where people can go on websites like Fiverr and get on Eat24 and Uber Eats and DoorDash and make just enough money to pay their bills and also have something left over and not have a boss, that's a really powerful thing. And so it's important for us to have an internal culture that is very vigilantly hammered into the business model, so that we have that equity with our employees, that when it comes to this situation, we give them that reason to stick around. And, you know, the biggest thing for us hasn't been people asking for raises, because the wages have gone up. There's no doubt about it. From the time that we started this thing to today, the wages have gone up, but it hasn't been so much. It's been more on the employees that we are interviewing, because stores volume has gone up and we've needed to add new staffers. Maybe someone that I've had in our system for 4 years that started off at $12 an hour and just now got to $14.50. And then in order to even get someone to interview with no experience is starting at $14.50. That has resulted in raises for the existing guys, which in turn, that's a conversation that I think gets lost on the minimum wage debate, is the existing employees, not so much the new employees, because the existing employees are the ones that feel the brunt of someone coming in, not having to put in the time and the effort, and it causes internal issues. But for me, even though we have 58 employees now, that's not enough employees that I can't personally figure out one-on-one what these guys' needs and wants are. It's really, at the end of the day, your employees are so important that you have to take time to get to know these guys and figure out what their wants and needs are. Some of my employees, the most important thing to them is stability. Some of these guys, the most important thing is compensation. And then some of these guys like being a part of a team. Some of these guys like recognition. You know, we have a managers group text with all the managers of all 16 stores, and they've all become friends. So, you know, one example I like to give is our manager in Pittsburgh. He's been with me 6 years now, and he's a huge Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And I buy him and his wife $25, $40 Penguins tickets every year. And that's going to be more endearing to him than a $100 Amazon gift card. And that kind of equity you build with your employees will go so much further than just, blindly giving Christmas bonuses and things like that. So that's kind of a real long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Jordan, you're up. Jordan's from Orem in the Salt Lake City area of Utah. Welcome.
Yeah, hey guys, it's nice to be here this morning. Yeah, just an hour south of Salt Lake. Excited to be on the chat. Great question about keeping employees. I think that's tricky. So thanks for sharing that. My question is pretty simple. Just what are you doing to differentiate the brand? I think you guys are coming into a market where there's some really established people already. So what's corporate going to do to help really just establish this brand for us, so that when people see our logo, they know who we are and what we do and that we're the best?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jordan. And we, top of mind brand awareness is a tricky thing. And we have a discovery day that we go into the secret sauce of the business. And I invite everybody on this call to join our discovery day. But one of the first exercises we do is I go around the room and I ask everybody, when you think of fast food, what do you think of? And it's been really interesting, because when we first had our first discovery day, because we haven't been franchising that long. We had our first discovery day in March of 2021, and I'd say 90% of people said McDonald's. When you hear fast food, you think McDonald's. And then, recently, the last maybe 4 or 5, it's been 50-50 McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. And I think that just shows that when you really pound home your brand building and your storytelling, you can create a narrative and you can change the top of mind brand awareness if you do it correctly. So for our franchisees that have a marketing area of 3 miles, we're going to really hammer home the storytelling side of brand building, because when you don't have a brand that differentiates you from the other competitors in the space, then you get into a race to the bottom on pricing. And the only one that wins that race is Jeff Bezos. No one else is winning that race right now, because he will lose billions of dollars in an effort to put out, the most innocuous industry you can think of. They're going to create an Amazon Basics of it. They've already created Amazon Basics for motor oil. I'm surprised they don't have Amazon Basics oil filters yet. And so the differentiator becomes the brand, and it really revolves around storytelling and spending your marketing dollars strategically. At this moment, Facebook ads, Instagram ads are still pound for pound, dollar for dollar, penny for penny, the best way to do your storytelling. And when you can really hammer in on what we think is the most important thing to the oil change customer, which is cleanliness, quick service, and a fair price, then you have the combination to win. When our larger competitors start doing all these other services, I think they are going to get into this identity crisis problem that it's kind of similar to what the American food restaurant industry went through, where TGI Friday, Applebee's, Ruby Tuesdays, all those companies, what differentiates them from each other at this point? And it's really tough to tell. And the automotive industry went through this a little bit, because most people look at Meineke and Midas and Monroe, and they don't even know who owns who, and they're all owned by private equity groups. And when you start getting into that space where you don't have a area of expertise, then you fall into this trap of just being another version. And so if we really hammer home fast oil change only as our brand, and then on top of that, as a subcategory, a inexpensive full synthetic, because the full synthetics are going to very quickly be more than 70% of oil changes in cars. And we talk a little bit in depth about that at the Discovery Day from a tactical level. But really, it comes down to strategic marketing around the story that you want to tell, which we think at the end of the day is selling customers their time back. Michael, I'm gonna.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm gonna keep taking calls. I'm just gonna.
Okay. Do we want to do a run through again? Does anyone else have a question, Keith? Any more questions?
I do, and it really goes around with kind of my initial question: how do we get cash flow positive quicker? I see this opportunity around fleet vehicles and delivery drivers. I own a large fleet. That's kind of how I originally got into this space and was interested in this space. But I have 52 delivery vans that need an oil change once a month. Time is money for all of those oil changes. If they're not out delivering, we're losing money on that particular vehicle. So, what kind of contracts, or do we have contracts in place with like a lease plan or an element or any of those type of contracts available? Or is it something that you're pursuing so that we could easily get into? And you mentioned Jeff Bezos, the Amazon delivery vans. There are thousands of those on the road in any one market, and these only have 10, 15 minutes a day to get an oil change. I think it's an untapped market. My delivery van sitting in the line at Valvoline for an hour to an hour and a half every day, and trying to figure out how we reduce that time.
Yeah, so fleets are the easiest way to mitigate the ramp up period. That is, very intuitive of you, and obviously being in the space, you understand that. So, we have a pretty comprehensive fleet training and a fleet script to get new fleets. We have several stores that the fleets pay the bills for the store, and then the retail customers are just the cherry on top. The managers need to be a part of that process. They see the vehicles that pass by the shop on a daily basis. I do think that the operator should be involved with making the phone calls. And it's as simple as offering net 30 terms with, we pick up the sales tax and, fill out a W-9 and we can go ahead and take care of your vehicles and, send us a check every 30 days. And that works really well for us. And we target vehicles that are constantly doing service in our service area. The managers will keep a notepad and just write down the names of because everybody brands everything now. Everyone brands their trucks. Everyone has their name and number on the side of the cars. And so fleets are the easiest way to shorten that ramp up period. That is for sure. Now, as far as the national accounts, the way that enterprise works is on an individual store basis. And same thing with WEX. So your entity, whatever your entity is, would call enterprise and get hooked up with their system. You'd go on the enterprise website as a vendor, and then you can collect at point of sale the enterprise cars. We only do enterprise because the other ones are just not enough to justify the fees for the terminal. Enterprise is probably the biggest fleet management program. And then the rest of our fleets are just directly between us and reaching out to customers. So it's not a question of having a specific card. So just to kind of elaborate on that for the other people on the call, WEX and Enterprise have their own kind of credit cards that can only be run on specific terminals. And so you have to be a member of their program in order to collect money from those particular cards. So that's not the majority of what our fleets are. The majority of our fleets are, Eddie's HVAC service with 12, E150 cargo vans, things like that. And those relationships really do help build up the customer base quickly.
Costa, do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, I popped out the door. Brandon's handling training really well right now, so I'll go ahead and stay on.
I think Jeremy had to leave, but Alfred, you're up next. Do you have another question for Costa?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Jordan, anything else?
Hey, Michael, do you mind if I jump in? I haven't had a chance to ask a question yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frank. I apologize. I missed you.
That's quite all right. Costa, it's nice to meet you. I'm Frank. I'm from the DFW area down here. I also have a banking background and also as a former Merrill Lynch guy myself. So a lot of what you talked about was very familiar to me, as well as also the way that you kind of looked at life. So that was kind of refreshing. Biggest question I have for you really is, what are, the biggest reasons really for underperformance in any of the, the franchises or branch locations? And what should we really be on the lookout for as far as avoiding or doing in particular? Is it really all about location in the brand storytelling, or is there more to it as far as that we need to be on the lookout for or wary of?
The key factor here, in my opinion, is the manager of the store in terms of their personality and the ability to have customer service and the overall just kind of ethos of the store. We're very quick to fire managers. And so when a store underperforms, it's usually because we're having turnover early in trying to find that right person. We literally put in our classified ads looking for kind people. The credibility issue in our space has been an issue. And so you might have a ASC certified mechanic, and God knows I've had those guys in my shops, and some of them have really terrible self-righteous attitudes, and customers in our space don't like that. And we view this business as retail first, automotive second. You can train anyone to do oil changes, but you can't train someone to be able to look the person in the eye and carry a conversation and be able to pick up on social cues to be able to make them feel comfortable. So we've had, I don't think location, it's so funny because there's so many splits in our industry right now. There are some people that will tell you that the oil change only model is the worst, you know, the worst thing you can do. And there's some people that's location is everything in this business. And I don't agree with that. Our highest performing store is literally in the middle of a neighborhood. It's not even a commercial area. It's if you Google the Harrisburg store, it's next to a bunch of row homes. And you know, for us, you know, it's a destination business for the most part, in my opinion. Most people wake up in the morning knowing that they need to get an oil change, so they're going to go to where they've heard the best things about. So the key really is, once you get them in the store, the stores that have had a lot of success for me, they buy into the model quickly and they do the things that we want them to do right off the bat. The longer it takes the staff to really buy into what we're doing, the longer it'll take for them to get that corner to turn. We've had managers. I had a manager in Poland, Ohio, which is a lower performing store, and he was charging $1 for the air. And he came to me and he's like, yeah, I started charging $1 for the air and no one says anything. And you know, we're making, and he thought that I was gonna like really appreciate that. And I was like, 99% of customers are non-confrontational. They're not gonna tell you that pissed them off. They're just gonna not come back. And those little behaviors end up costing you more time, because you have to get that person back somehow, and you have to wait for the oil change intervals to start overlapping. And so it's important to get it right the first time, because that'll mitigate the ramp up period as well. So and sometimes it's tough to convince these guys that have worked for, you know, either Jiffy Lube or Valvoline for so many years to unwind some of their habits. But the guys that buy in right away and they make it through those early days, those are the stores that do really, really well quicker.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Let me just see. I think Jordan may have left us. Yeah, he left. So I guess we're through all the questions. Unless you have a few more minutes, anyone else has a last question? No? Okay.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Costa.
All right. I won't be seeing you this week, Michael, but I will be seeing Chris.
Well, I know I don't think you guys are going to have any space. There's so many people coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that, Costa. And I guess, Frank, I'll catch up with you personally. Thank you for making the call. And I know Chris and Kristan are on here. They have clients on as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Good use of time.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Alfred,
Soon.